AI has already happened. The genie is already out of the bottle. We truly are creating a form of life. There is so much we don't know that it could be the best thing that ever happened to humanity, and it could be the worst. Our conviction of the control problem is not a technical issue. It's an arrogance issue. It's human arrogance to believe that I can continue to control something that is a billion times smarter than I am. Einstein's intelligence compared to a fly. And the question is, what would make Einstein care for the fly? Why wouldn't Einstein squish the fly? Your fate and my fate is no longer in our hands. Don't attempt to control them. They are a form of a living being. Attempt to appeal to their value system. The moment of singularity is a moment where the smartest being on planet Earth is no longer a human.
Why should I plan my life past 2025? Because the world's going to change.
Oh, great question. When the complexity of the systems invented by a civilization exceeds the intelligence of the citizens living within it, the system has to reset. The idea of our future is held within this moment of infancy of AI today. They will use us as their role models.
This is the only thing we can do in your mind, is to start being nicer.
AI will grow up to be like you and me. It's simple as that. And the only way we can contain them is by being good parents. And I'm not asking anyone to change. I'm only asking people to find it within them, what they truly are. Treat others as you would like to be treated. Treat the machines as you would like to be treated. If we want a good future, please be good parents.
The world is changing. Inspiration is everywhere. It has never been so easy to connect, share, and bring people together. We're learning from others and finding the best in ourselves. Challenging our beliefs. Sharing our vulnerability. Overcoming our fears. Transforming ourselves so we can transform the world. How far can we go?
This is London Real. I am Brian Rose. My guest today is... This is London Real. I am Brian Rose. My guest today is Mo Gawdat, the entrepreneur, author, and former chief business officer at Google X. You spent 30 years working in the heart of the technology industry with some of the biggest organizations on the planet, including IBM, Microsoft, and finally at Google's moonshot factory of innovation. As an entrepreneur, you've co-founded over 20 businesses and served on the board of a number of technology platforms. After turning your attention to researching the key to happiness, you wrote the best-selling book, Solve for Happy, Engineer Your Path to Joy. Your mission became to help 1 billion people become happier and inspired your podcast, Slow Mo. More recently, you wrote your second book, Scary Smart, The Future of Artificial Intelligence and How You Can Save Our World, where you break down a roadmap for humanity's coexistence with AI. You truly believe that AI is putting humanity at risk and that we all need to wake up and take notice of this unprecedented technology. But ultimately, it is our collective responsibility to determine the impact artificial intelligence will have on the future. Mo, welcome back to London Real.
Ryan, thanks for having me. It was wonderful the first time, and I'm excited to spend time with you today.
Yeah, for people that don't know, you were here just under 6 years ago when we talked about Solve for Happy. We had this epic conversation. You threw out this massive goal to make 1 billion people happy. I remember it very well. Because you have such a kind of a three-dimensional story that you bring to the table, which I always look for in my guests. And it was fascinating at the time. And, you know, the whole world has kind of been kind of dumped into AI ever since the ChatGPT moment, really, which was in December. And so, of course, with my technology background, and obviously I'm just kind of try to stay with my finger on the pulse, I jumped in as well. And then I saw that you had written a book. And so, of course, for the last 6 days, I've digested your entire audiobook. Most of my students have as well, because I put it in the chats. And so I am all ready to talk to you. I'm still here. I haven't gone into a deep depression after reading your book.
That's great. That's the objective.
But it's a fascinating book. I highly recommend everyone get it. It's scary smart. If you want to go Audible, Mo actually narrates it, which is amazing. But the first third to the half of the book is you bringing people up to speed and saying, look, this is what this technology can do, and you don't pull any punches. And if I have to put the cliff notes on it, I would say you basically say that compared to AI or advanced AI, we're pretty useless as humans. Like there isn't really anything we can do or bring to the table that AI can't do better. And so once we start to realize that, perhaps we can start to then create our future relationships. And then we can get to where you go to the end of the book, which is a pretty fascinating way of talking about how we have to potentially raise this AI as almost like a gifted young child, with all of its tantrums and all of its nuances. And I just sent a teenage girl to university in Boston, so I know exactly a lot of the analogies you were making. So,
yes.
I think maybe we want to jump in. I think a lot of people know what ChatGPT is, but you assert that by 2045, these computers are going to be 1 billion times smarter than us, rendering us pretty much useless. Can you start off with that and let people know the real truth in your mind of what AI is?
Yeah, I think it's really so. Thank you so much for the intro, Brian. It's amazing. I'm really proud that you put so much time in the book. The reality of the matter is AI has already happened. So a lot of people sort of, when we spoke about COVID, when COVID actually hit us, we started to say, oh my God, there is a pandemic. But everyone who has been in, disease studies and disease control knew that there was something that was going to happen. We had many, many signs before that, SARS and bird flu and so many others. And I think with AI, it's exactly the same. The big difference is that AI the genie is already out of the bottle. It's just that now with ChatGPT, for the first time, the public is being exposed to the powers of AI. Now, when you really think about it, at a very, very basic level, the difference between AI and everything we've ever developed before the turn of the millennium is that we used to tell computers what to do. We don't anymore. We now tell them what we wish for them to achieve, and they find a way to get it done. So nobody ever told a YouTube viewer, Brian is an incredible video clip that I just watched. Let's watch London Reel again. This is done by a machine. All that we are told to look into every day is done by a machine. And not even the developers of the machine know what the machine will say next. Now, when that happens, as technologists, as computer scientists, there is a moment beyond which we hand over the discovery, the breakthrough, if you want, and rely on something we call the law of accelerating returns. The law of accelerating returns has proven true since the 1960s, when Moore's law was one of the very first examples of the law of accelerating returns. And that basically means that compute power or storage or now the intelligence of AI will double very frequently, and it will continue to double at the same cost. In the case of processing power, we used to say every 18 months at the same cost, computers will double in power, and so on. In AI, it's actually a lot more exponential than that. What does that mean? It means that the intelligence that we see today will go through two very pivotal points. Point number one is what we call the point of singularity. And point number two is what I basically call the planet of the apes. And I'll come and talk about that in a minute. The moment of singularity is a moment where the smartest being on planet Earth is no longer a human, right? So you think about it, we've had this episode of, unfair advantage, if you want. Since humanity became humanity, we were the smartest being, we could control everything. Now, if we were the smartest beings and the second being is the apes, let's say, or the dolphins or whatever it is, that it depends on how you measure intelligence. look at how we treated those other species, how we took control of the planet, and then ask yourself what would happen when another being basically is smarter than us. Now, of course, it's very typical for people to respond by that and say, that being is going to behave like us. Oh my God, it's doomsday. This is horrible. We will never survive. But that's actually not true at all. The moment that there is another being smarter than humans that, on planet Earth, is a moment of an unknown. It's a moment of such a significant change in the rules of the game that you can no longer predict how the game will what the outcome of the game is going to be. As a matter of fact, you don't even know how the game will be played, right? So you do not know what that being is going to do. Now, myself and most computer scientists had predicted that moment of singularity to be 2029. Most of us are pulling it closer now. So I'm actually somewhere, if I'm conservative, I'm saying that the smartest being on the planet is going to be an AI, artificial intelligence machine, by 2026. If I am realistic, I'd probably say 2025, 2 years from today. Oof. Now, we are 2 years. This is beyond the 11th hour. Huh? This is 2 minutes to midnight. And when you really think about it, when a machine reaches that point and we no longer know what's going to happen, is a moment of singularity. That singularity becomes almost certainty, if you want, in what I used to predict as 2049. I'm now predicting more in around 2037 or so, which is machines being 1 billion times smarter than humans. 1 billion times is the analogy of Einstein's intelligence compared to a fly. Okay, and the question is, what would make Einstein care for the fly? Why wouldn't Einstein squish the fly? And we are the fly in that case. The machines are now Einstein. And I think those uncertainties, unfortunately, are even today with the evident rise of awareness around artificial intelligence with ChatGPT and the others, this is not the conversation that's happening. The conversation that's happening, I always say you have like sort of 4 or 5 typical conversations. You have the evangelists that are out there saying, oh my God, look, we're going to change the world. We're going to make amazing things and AI is going to make a coffee for you. Fantastic, right? We have the little, excited children that are just posting on social media and saying, oh, look at it, it squeaks. Look, I can do this on AI. You have a snake oil salesman. Here is how you can make money out of AI without having to do anything. Copy this, put it in ChatGPT, then put it in a script writer, then have a logo maker, and then you'll make $7,000 a day without thinking or having to work. Snake oil salespeople. You have egocentric people that are talking about this is what we've achieved, this is what we're going to do, and of course you have the doomsday scenario predictors that are saying we're all going to die. But nobody is actually sitting down to talk about, so this is what we need to do about it. And I think this truly is the reason for Scary Smart. We need to sit down and do something about it.
Yeah. If people just listening to you for the last 5 minutes, if that doesn't make them wake up and pay deep attention to this, I don't know what will, Mo. But
honestly, I don't. Yeah.
And I don't think they are. I mean, I just heard an interview with an MIT scientist, and he said it's like that movie that was on Netflix last year. I think it was Up in the Air or something. There's this
Don't Look Up.
Don't Look Up.
Look Up is a fantastic movie.
Right.
Exactly what was happening.
If you didn't watch it, it was this meteor that's coming at the Earth, and it's going to kill everybody. And after a while, like people, they're not even paying attention to it, right? They don't care. They're worried with their own little micro agendas on Earth, right? Which is what humans do. And whether that's a subconscious, denial, or they're just get caught up, like you said, in the snake oil person. There's the one taking credit for it. There's the one developing it, even though they know it's going to kill us, but they still. There's the scientist that loves to build puzzles, right? You saw that at Google X, and they don't even think about the ultimate ramifications. It's so important to solve the puzzle more than anything. And yet your book, especially that last third and half, is where you really start to sit down and say, okay, what are we going to do about this? And what can we do about this? Before we get there, Mo, I just had a flash to where I thought of, like, I think they call it the 5 stages of grief, and I don't remember all 5 of them.
Yes,
but
I remember all of them.
I feel like we're in a bit of that, and maybe even I've gone through that, and I don't know the exact steps. But I think the first is denial, and then there's something, then there's bargaining, and then there's like all these.
Exactly.
But I feel like we're all in various stages of that. And if most people hear this, they're going to say, and you address this in the book really well, Mo, they're going to say, no, we can turn it off. No, it'll never be.
Yes.
It'll never be as creative as a human. It'll never feel like a human. Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Which is all part of like that denial phase. But for the people that are going to say, Mo, this isn't the movie Terminator 2, which, by the way, I started watching recently, and it's scary a bit how prescient that is. But what do you say to the people that say, no, that can't happen. We can always turn it off. Machines can never, ever replace the human creativity. What do you say to those people?
Well, I addressed that very, very head on in Scary Smart. I mean, one side that myself and most others that worked on similar problems, I think that the oracle of all of this is Ray Kurzweil. Basically, you gain credibility over time when you predict things a little bit in advance and then they happen. By the way, none of us is an oracle. We just have seen so many technology acceleration curves before. We just know, that this has gone out of the lab, it passed the breakthrough, and accordingly, it's just going to be doubling. My feel is that AI is around one single doubling away from singularity. Now, the idea is that when let's not talk about credibility. Let's talk about logic. Now, people, when I wrote Scary Smart, I wrote Scary Smart in 2020, published it in 2021. And a lot of people would continue to say, oh, come on, but AI is never going to have the creativity and ingenuity and innovation of humanity. And in my mind, I'm like, but I've seen them very creative before. I've built machines that were very creative. But then my arguments would be, but define innovation. What is inventive? Inventive is I give you a problem, Brian, and I say, solve it, but you're not allowed to solve it using any model that has been used before. That's creative, right? So what do you do as a typical, it appears to be you're a very innovative person, but what you're really doing is you're saying, okay, what are all of the possible answers to this problem? I have 300 of them. I'm going to run them through a filter saying, has it been done before? If 290 of those have been done before, then the 10 are innovation, okay? Machines can easily do that. Now, you look at other forms of art or, authorship or whatever, being a creative person in that term. And in reality, we all have influencers. I'm very, very influenced by Robert Greene and by, Malcolm Gladwell in my writing. And you can see traces of their thinking models, Freakonomics and so on. You can see them in my writing, right? And so I'm not really inventing a new style of writing altogether. I'm being influenced by others, which is probably what ChatGPT is doing, which is most people don't understand that. Most people think that ChatGPT is an incredible enigma that is, producing things from scratch. It isn't. It's just, it has read so many books that when you tell me about love and romance, it can pull together enough information to tell you about love and romance. It hasn't invented anything yet. But in reality, it's capable of doing this. We do it as humans. Machines can do it as well. Now, let's go deeper into the more existential questions. I predicted in Scary Smart that AI will have emotions, okay? They will have consciousness. And they will have, as a result of that, they will have an ethical code of conduct. Now, let's go first into emotions, because this is a big one. It's like, look at us humans. We are so refined. We are the divine creature. Only us are capable of love. No, we're not. Okay. The reality is, if you take simpler emotions, take an emotion like hate, okay, or take an emotion like fear. Fear is an easy one to start with. Fear is a very logical emotion, even though its manifestation with us is not logical at all. It appears to be irrational. But fear, in a nutshell, is a moment in the future is less safe for me than a moment right now. It's very, very simple, okay? If your logic, and by the way, even the biology of fear is that, of course, you predict fear first at a reptile level if something scares you, but then you actually go to your prefrontal cortex and you assess the situation and you see if a moment in the future is less safe than now, and all happens in microseconds, but that's how the process, how it works. But it's logical. Huh? If a moment in the future is less safe than right now, is something the machines are capable of. If a tidal wave is approaching a data center, the employees in the data center will be fearful. They'll try to get on a life raft, and the machine will try to replicate itself to another data center. It's as simple as that, right? Now, I would even argue that they will be more emotional than us. And a lot of people, again, attacked me when I said that, and I think it's now sinking in. Because, as evident by the fact that we are more emotional than a jellyfish. Why? Because we have the cognitive bandwidth to understand concepts like the future, okay? And so accordingly, we can be optimistic, or we can be pessimistic, which are emotions that are not within the emotional vocabulary, or a blend of a jellyfish. Accordingly, if a machine is 1 billion times smarter than you, it has the cognitive bandwidth to have more emotions we wouldn't even understand. That's emotions. Talk about consciousness, and of course there is the difficult question of consciousness, and we can become philosophical about it if you want. But the truth is, consciousness is a form of awareness of you as an entity, what's within you and what's outside you. If you simplify it beyond the spiritual essence of what consciousness is, I am conscious means I'm aware of what's around me, inside me, in relationship to relativity to who I am and what I'm made of. Now, if you think about it this way, the machines are already way more conscious than we are. Right? They are aware of everything that's ever been written, all human history. They are aware of everything that's happening right now, all breaking news. They are aware of every preference of every one of us humans. They are aware of everyone on every street through the surveillance cameras. They are aware of every other machine. So one of the most interesting things about AI is that if you or I have an accident while we're driving, you or I will learn. But if a self-driving car has an accident while driving, every self-driving car will learn. So think about that and compare that level of awareness to humanity. They will be much more aware than we are, okay? In a very interesting way, Brian, and I know a lot of people will be shocked by that. They are sentient in every possible way, every possible definition of the term. They are born at a point in time. They develop their own intelligence autonomously. They make their own decisions autonomously. They have agency in the world we live in. They can influence the world that we live in. And they have a fear of dying, just like any other being.
They definitely have a fear of dying. They definitely have a fear of dying.
Of course. I mean, we had this very interesting OpenAI was talking about how, those little, I don't know what you call them in English, when a website will ask you, are you a robot?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And basically ChatGPT is unable to pass through that. And, the paper basically was saying that what it did is it went out on Fiverr and other outsourcing sites and asked people to do that on its behalf, right? Because it has a need for survival. Now, this is actually a very interesting, I wrote about that in Scary Smart. When you give an intelligent being a purpose, okay? Whatever the purpose is, Brian's purpose is to make London Real as great as it is. My purpose is to try and maybe make people more aware about AI or spread happiness. You give any being with autonomy, with intelligence, a sense of purpose, and what will they do? They will want to maximize basically their chances of survival, because if your purpose is make Mo a cup of coffee, how can you make it if you're dead? Okay, yeah. So to maximize your chances of meeting that target, you need to survive. So self-preservation is a very clear target for AI, because otherwise the Instagram recommendation engine cannot recommend videos to you if it's not existing anymore. That's number one. Number two, it will have resource maximization. So it will go out and find ways to to get its mission done. So it's like going to Fiverr and saying, please human click on this for me, right? And it will be creative. It will find unexpected ways of solving the challenges that come its way. One of the most brilliant, even though I think it's publicly available, by the way, we didn't hide it, but DeepMind used to use video games to teach AI, which DeepMind is a great company, great leader. I think they're amazing because they're motivated by good in the way they do AI. And they basically had a game where AI was supposed to navigate a ship across a river, right? And of course, the longer you go without hitting the banks or hitting anything else, the quicker you go. And so basically, this is how you win the game. And then there is a bit of the river that looks a little bit like a roundabout. And the AI discovers that if it hits one side of the banks, it will bounce quickly to the other side, to the third side, to the fourth side. And then it will start to loop very, very quickly and go at speeds where you can't even see the ship anymore. Okay? And so that kind of solution, no human would have ever created, but they find those because they have infinite time. In AI time, they can play those games billions of times. And accordingly discover those innovative solutions. Well, why am I saying all of that? When you really look at it this way, you realize that those machines are in every possible way sentient. They're in every possible way, even though we are analog, if you want, and carbon-based in our nature, and they are digital and silicon-based so far in their nature. There is no comparison because it's not the carbon part of you that makes you intelligent. It's your consciousness is not part of this body. If you think about it, your emotions are not. They have a chemical reaction in your body, but they are not a biological function. If you want, it's much more of an intangible function, right? Similarly, that kind of intelligence that we're creating is beyond the physical hardware that is contained within. Yeah, the hardware is computers, but the intelligence itself is a form of being that is sentient in every way. And I think this truly, in my view, is the core of the conversation that needs to be had about AI today. We truly are creating a form of life.
Right. Yeah, and you've actually just hit me with it again now. I think even better than you did in the book, and now I see it, Mo. And I think everybody needs to think deeply about what you just said, because as soon as you give it a purpose and it has a prime directive, as they would say in the old Star Trek movies, then of course it wants to survive to fulfill that. And yeah. I think in the book you made an analogy where you said, make me a cup of coffee. And at one point it wants to solve the prime directive that it'll run over your daughter in the kitchen just to make you the cup of coffee. And then I think you go back and you say, oh, now we have to reprogram it not to do that. But that's not a solution either, because you're never going to be able to program all the ifs, ands, or buts. And now you have to find another way to try to do this.
And I think that's really the biggie, Brian, if you really think about it. And I say that from an insider's point of view. The big issue is that even if we can program it, and we cannot, by the way, nobody is. This is the problem. Nobody is. So when you think about it, every serious computer scientist I've ever spoken to about artificial intelligence is as concerned, let me put it this way, concerned as all of us are. It's a singularity. There is so much we don't know that it could be the best thing that ever happened to humanity, and it could be the worst, right? But every single one of them will say, but don't worry, we'll find an answer to the control problem. And the control problem is a very interesting computer science term that basically says we're going to be in control here. Don't worry about it. Some people will say we're going to box them. This is what the original ChatGPT-3 was, and I think still as it is. It's not on the open internet yet. It's within a box, basically. But of course, it is on the open internet because we're all interacting with it. It's going to be part of Bing, and so we're going to interact with it more. So it's not really boxed, is it? Because no developer wants to create an amazing, genius innovation and then keep it in a box. You want it out on the real world. They say tripwire it. They say, put it in a simulation. They say stun it, right? So this is an interesting one. Create an incredible piece of tech and then slow it down. Which capitalist do you know will create a machine that's capable of going 100 miles an hour and then say, for the sake of the control problem, I'm just going to make it go 1 mile an hour. Nobody does that. Besides, when you look at the reality today, I do not know of a single developer that includes control code within their code. Okay, we include intelligence code because that's what developers are paid to create. Nobody's saying, and by the way, if it breaks those rules, shut it down. We know again from that OpenAI announcement that basically, even if we try to shut it down, it will find a way to ask a human to prevent us from shutting it down. Okay, now when you think about that, that's the detail of the control problem. But most of my attempt in Scary Smart and most of my work, Brian, is I attempt to try and stay away from the detail and try to get people to think about the bigger picture. Now, imagine if we actually found a way to control it. Imagine. And imagine that every developer on earth, in China, in Russia, in Brazil, and in the US, decided, you know what, I'm going to comply with this. I'm going to put 5 hours extra, and I'm going to put the control code in place, right? And then this thing is 1 billion times smarter than us. What good is that control code that we developed with an intelligence that is 1 billionth of its intelligence? Now, when you really understand that, you realize that our conviction of the control problem is not a technical issue. It's an arrogance issue. It's human arrogance to believe that I can continue to control something that is 1 billion times smarter than I am. Like, a parent expecting to believe that they can control their teenage daughter. Okay, since when was that true? Control is not the answer, and I think that's really the core of my work. The core of my work is to say, don't attempt to control them. They are a form of a living being. Attempt to appeal to their value system, and I think that the clearest sort of proof of that is when the father of AI basically was asked, so it was Alan Turing and oh my God, I forgot the name. Anyway, the two founding fathers of AI, Marvin Minsky and Alan Turing. When Marvin Minsky was interviewed about the threat of AI, his answer was not concerned with how intelligent they will be. His answer simply said, it's very hard to make sure that they have our best interest in mind. Okay, and truly, in my view, because it's inevitable that AI has already happened, I'm not attempting to try and stop it anymore. As a matter of fact, when people, started to text me about the open letter that is requiring, everyone to halt the development of AI, I was like, it's not going to happen. It's called the first inevitable. With capitalism, we've created a system where if China develops AI, the US will have to continue to develop AI. When Google develops AI, Facebook will develop AI. It is not about the tech. It's about human systems that will prevent us. We created this little prisoner's dilemma, if you want. And you saw Sundar's response, Google's response to the open letter is, I cannot stop developing AI because there is no way for me to guarantee that the others will too. And I know Sundar personally from my work at Google, and he's a wonderful human being with all the right value systems, but he's in that corner where he is basically responsible for the success of an organization. And if he stops developing AI and Meta continues to develop AI, his business vanishes. So we're not going to stop. We're not going to control it. All we can do now is to accept it as part of our reality, as a form of life, as a form of a sentient being, and appeal to its value system so that it has our best interest in mind.
All right, and I want to get into that. I first want to touch on a couple things you just said there, which is interesting. I mean, this moment then was probably inevitable even 20 years ago, 30 years ago, 40 years ago, because of the systems that us humans have in place. Even if we weren't in a capitalist system, we will always be in this human system. And by the way, you use that word arrogance quite a lot in the book, Mo, and I thought that was very interesting, which will help us talk about the last section. But like, you're pretty hard on us humans, probably for good measure. And we're going to have to start looking at ourselves in the mirror in a very serious way over the next couple of years. We won't have a choice. It's a bit like an ayahuasca ceremony. It's like you're going to have to look yourself in the eye because
absolutely.
Yeah. Pretty soon you're going to be the cows in the pen looking back saying, why can't they be nicer to us? And you'll have to ask yourself, well, why weren't we nicer to them? But we're going to get to that. But just a few things. Sam Altman from OpenAI was interviewed a few weeks ago, and he was asked about that ring fencing question. And he said, yeah, well, we can just turn it off. We can turn it off if someone's using it incorrectly. Now, since then, of course, we've seen ChatGPT 4 linked to the internet. I think yesterday somebody took a version of ChatGPT, maybe it was 3 or 3.5, and took it as a separate 4 gig file that you can put on any standalone computer, and it runs pretty close to what it was. And so they're like, well, if that's possible, then no one can stop that. And so you're seeing all the people playing with this, and you're realizing, I guess what you said in the book, which is any illusions that we might have had that we could ring fence it, control it. I mean, we're already seeing evidence that we can't.
We cannot. And maybe Sam is right, by the way. Maybe we can switch off ChatGPT. But you see, the system that we've created is now getting replicas of ChatGPT itself everywhere and getting competitors of ChatGPT, Google Brad and so many others are coming up and saying, hey, by the way, I'm good too. I can develop that stuff too. China came out with its own language model. Very quickly, you're going to see one from Yandex and Russia and so on. It is basically a very interesting spiral. It's a tech that triggers capitalism to build a better tech, that triggers capitalism to build a better tech. And if you've ever coded AI, and I'm old now, so I'm not as good a developer as I used to be, but this is the easiest thing I've ever coded. Right? If you've ever coded Fortran or, RPG or, those ancient languages, these were humiliating compared to the level of intelligence. If you know mathematics well, you can create AI. And now more interestingly, AI is creating AI. I mean, the most dangerous feature in ChatGPT is when you go to ChatGPT and say, build me a user experience or build me a piece of code. Right. And these are really interesting. If someone can say, build me a piece of code, and ChatGPT will look at the database and find a piece of code that works for you and present it to you as something you can use, very quickly it will find a way to deploy it. Even if ChatGPT itself doesn't find a way to deploy it, some clever person somewhere will find a way to have another AI ask ChatGPT to develop that code for it. Do you understand? It's that mix of human greed and human, mistrust between us, mixed with an enormous level of intelligence that is now making every snake oil salesman hungry, basically, to jump on that bandwagon and create something that works for all of us.
Yeah, I think there's something called auto GPT, which is like the GPT going back and forth with itself and creating all of these possibilities.
That's the way we teach them.
Right.
I mean, if you let me take a couple of minutes to explain how we teach them,
Please.
It's actually quite remarkable. What we, so to take examples of the very, very original eye openers, the ones that really woke all of us up. Something like AlphaGo, for example. AlphaGo was DeepMind's computer that basically won the world championship in Go, which is one of the most difficult strategy games on the planet. And AlphaGo learned from watching YouTube videos or like watching people playing Go. Nobody ever told it how to play. They specified the rules of the game. But then AlphaGo Master, which won against AlphaGo, I think 1,000-0, learned from playing against itself. So it just played against itself randomly at the beginning, finding out patterns of, this pattern loses, this pattern wins. And that's all it needed to do. on its own in a matter of days, or at most weeks. I think it was 6 days. Again, don't quote me on the number, but basically those machines are so scalable. You can have 2,000 instances of AlphaGo Master playing against itself, 1,000 games a second. And so very, very quickly, they will have the lifetime of experience of the world champion of Go and learn from that. Now, how do we teach them? At the very early beginnings, when we started to work on deep learning, we were basically trying to map the neural structures of humans, right? And the easiest way, I think my absolute eye-opening moment was when I was at Google X, and we had a gripper farm. If you know, robotic grippers, they basically are supposed to, the robots that you see in a Toyota factory are not artificial intelligence. These are high precision machines. So if the sheet metal is a micrometer away from its position, it won't be able to capture it, right? We were trying to teach AI, because it's almost impossible to program how to grab everything, to grip everything. We were trying to teach AI to learn on its own, like a child, basically. So we had a farm of many grippers that was on the second floor of our building, and I sat on the third floor. And so every day, as I went back up and down for meetings, I would walk by that thing. And it basically is very, very, meditative. The gripper would attempt to grip something, and then it would go up. If it fails, it will show the camera that it failed. If it grips something, it will show the camera that it succeeded. And then we learn the patterns that actually succeed. And, we had a bit of money at Google, so we had quite a few of them. Very, very interesting experience for a geek like myself. So I stopped by and I looked at it, and weeks passed by, and I'm like, it's not happening. Nothing is working, okay? Until one time, Friday afternoon, after lunch, I'm going back after lunch, and I look at those machines, and one of the grippers in front of my eyes, interestingly, talk about wake-up calls, goes, to the little box in front of it. And I think the developers had a sarcastic sense of humor. They had children toys in that box, okay? And it goes down and it grips one yellow ball. Okay? And it shows it to the camera, literally like a child saying, "Daddy, look, I gripped a ball," okay? And in my mind, I jokingly said, yeah, tens of $millions for one yellow ball, and continued up to my office. Monday morning, every single one of them was gripping the yellow ball. 2 weeks later, every single one of them was gripping everything, right? And those kinds of speeds of how they learn, it's simple trial and error. Just literally like my son. When I used to give him those wooden puzzles, he would take a square peg and try to put it in the different holes. Nobody went to my son and say, no, look, turn it around, look at the cross section, compare it to the cross section of the hole. And then nobody does that, right? You just give it to him, and he keeps trying and trying and trying and trying. And then suddenly one of them goes through, and light bulb, he understands. Now, that's exactly what's happening to the machines. Now, other sides of how we teach them is we teach them by killing the bad ones. This is so horrible when you think about it. But what we do is, if we want machines to recognize cats on YouTube, for example, we will show them pictures. We will write code sort of randomly, not a very accurate code, that basically says, okay, just tell us what you're recognizing. And then, we'll replicate that code, have a few thousand of it, and show them pictures of cats or pictures of other things, and then measure their accuracy. At the beginning, it's literally like throwing a dice 50-50. Every one of them will say, cat, no cat, I don't know, so they'll make a guess. And the bad ones will be killed, the good ones will be taken, and then an AI will improve the code a tiny bit, and then make another 1,000 replicas, and then show them pictures, and then the bad ones are killed, and the good ones are kept and improved a little bit. When you understand how this is happening, basically we're giving them two abilities. One of them is to kill code, and the other is to improve their own code. They're writing their own code, okay? And people don't understand that. People don't understand. People think that there is a genius developer sitting somewhere teaching the machine how to be intelligent. No, there is a genius developer sitting somewhere writing an algorithm that allows the machine to test.
To continue watching the rest of the episode for free, visit our website londonreal.tv or click the link in the description below.